G'day, AJ Mahara here, with the third part in this series, which probably has many more parts than I've conceived of some already. But the borderline personality disorder woman and their hypersexuality and the attractiveness of that. You know, truthfully, it is only another part of the who you thought she was experience. That doesn't mean hypersexuality can't last one ghosting or one, quote, I need to take a break, unquote, ghosting, or one splitted evaluation that leads to the ghosting or the discard or the breakup, but that the reverse hoovering or the hoovering is going to happen and people get back together. This isn't always, right? But this happens for many people, and at least one or two or three cycles going around again. So it doesn't happen for everybody, but it happens for a lot of men. So I'm talking to men again, obviously. Well, and I should just say on this subject, I'm also talking to lesbian women. So heterosexual men having some things in common in terms of being with borderline women, as do lesbian women have in common being with borderline women. And of course, they have hypersexuality, whether they are heterosexual or lesbian. So I'm not going to fuse these too much together. I'm going to have another one coming for lesbian women who are with the borderline female. So right now, to men again, the borderline woman's hypersexuality, it comes with the idealization, the mirroring. If you want to call it love bombing, it's not like the narcissist though. It's not targeted. They don't know what they're doing in the sense of it's not on purpose. It's not active seduction. Now, there's an element of it that is very seducing when you have codependency and you don't have enough boundaries and you don't know what's happening, but that later you'll come to find out, or you may already know all too well, and so painfully, that it was your lack of boundaries in a certain area and the needs and the thirst and the hunger that you've had from your childhood for, not on the sexual plane, but for being seen, for being, for somebody really coming at you like, wow, you're terrific, and everything is just so, for a little bit, about you. This is really what people with BPD, but the borderline woman does, because she's seeking identity through you. It's the urge to merge. And more to the point, it's the beginning. Every time you get close to somebody with BPD, or you start to, a woman in this case, it's going to be the beginning of the object relations. So as I've said in my video, if you haven't seen it, check it out, Inside BPD Idealization. These people with BPD untreated do not, and especially women I'm talking about here, do not see you in idealization any more than they do in devaluation. Now, what the heck does that mean? It means they're following some desperate emotional patterns. They want to be loved, they want to love, but they don't know how to take in love or trust love, and they don't know how to give love. So what's happening is, on a very unconscious level, that borderline woman is, in the beginning, was idealizing you and seeking to merge and have identity through you. Because they don't know the difference between self, because they have the lack of self, and other. So getting more specific, as I've talked about these other things many times in ghosting, and there's other videos I've done up there. So I want to get right into this hypersexuality reality as only being another part of the who you thought she was experience, which is so painful. I know I don't have to tell men out there how painful it is, or even lesbian women out there how painful it is, because it's like so fantastic. It's all so fantastic. And the hypersexuality and the intensity that comes with that. And with people with BPD, with women with BPD in general, men too, but never mind men with BPD right now. This intensity, along with the hypersexuality, along with everything else, is like, it's just, it's the borderline siren song. Like I have a video by the title of that. It's just a way too good to be true, but you can't see it coming down the pike situation. And then it's so good, and it's so awesome, and it's everything you probably could have ever dreamed of, and then some, and the next thing you know, then the relational nightmare and the impossibility with any untreated borderline begins, and that means after the idealization initial phase and the honeymoon phase comes the defense mechanism of splitting in its totality, because so micro splits or major splits of devaluation, but maybe not ones that make them, or not make them, but fuel their ghosting you or ending the relationship or stonewalling you, but that the relationship continues on, but then you're on the eggshells, and things will happen differently with this hypersexuality. And not every single woman with BPD who is hypersexual, and they're all very intense, will have the same kind of pattern of how this is going to start to wax and wane. And I think, like in a couple other videos I put up comments so far, men are sharing that, it didn't really feel real. And, it seemed like it was all about the borderline X. So the thing is that borderlines confuse need with love. And borderlines need, capital N, or just capitalize the whole word, need so much. And the more they need, and the more they start to try to relate to you, they don't, but they're relating to object other parent representation, good parent in idealization, bad parent in devaluation. So they're never really actually relating to you. So could there be moments in physical intimacy where that they could be really relating to you? Well, sure. And every woman with BPD is untreated is going to be a little bit different with that in that regard. But the hypersexuality and that intensity and the marriage of those two aspects of who you think this person is, along with everything else that you think is true about this person that ends up not being true about them, it's mind-boggling and so confusing. And again, I want to reiterate for men that this is, not for all men, but for so many clients I've worked with, it's what drives a lot of men back to reverse hoover and back, to go through the whole darn thing over again, only you can never get back to the same idealization, even if you get back, even if you go around it again, because many men do. I'm just talking about men here, so women do it with borderline men too. So the thing is, the sex and the intensity that becomes an addiction that is such a huge central part of the trauma bond for codependent men. The thing about that is, what am I leading up to saying here? Well, not only is the borderline woman's hypersexuality and intensity only another part of the who you thought she was experience that will play out in different times and in different ways, with, not decreasing intensity, but decreasing sexuality, maybe going from hypersexual to asexual, a lot of different issues and problems around sexual activity or intimacy. I was going to say intimacy, but it's not really intimacy, is it? Like on a physical level, maybe sometimes it gets there, but there's no emotional intimacy. So it's not really making love. It's great sex. Like a lot of men tell me, it's great sex. And that becomes very addictive, and this becomes a part of the trauma bond that isn't explained by what happened to you in childhood at all, because it's not about your wounded inner child. The adult male in you who is very much desiring and enjoying the great sex. So what I want to really say in this video about this, the main message here is that very intense hypersexuality presented in idealization that is only another part of the who you thought she was experience to varying lengths of time with each individual woman with BPD who's not only intense but hypersexual. So this is the reality of what helps you to smack together with them and them to smack together with you in relationship real quick and all of that stuff. That's wonderful in the beginning. But it is equally what then blows the relationship apart. And as the man, as the codependent man, likely, it's nothing you do. It's nothing you say. It's not what you didn't do. It's not what you did do. It's not what you did say. It's not what you didn't say. Because the impossibility was already set when the relationship began, when the table was set, so to speak. And so what I'm saying is that just like in idealization with this intensity and the hypersexuality and the great sex, it is fantastic, and that coming together really quickly, it's going to blow apart, and it's going to be for the woman with borderline personality with the hypersexuality, which may be waning already or gone to asexuality, if that's a word, or being more asexual or not wanting sex so much or having so much triggered, dysregulated emotion when trying to be physically intimate or when being physically intimate, that this accrues for them and they don't understand it. And you may or may not be aware of it. Some of them really keep it in. Sometimes men experience really different things that you don't expect to experience with an adult woman in terms of like they're crying or they need you to stop in the middle of being physically intimate or in some cases age regression and talking like a child in the middle of it all, which is just so distressing to men, understandably. So it is this very thing but it is all of this that was the smacking together very quick, falling in love with who you thought she was. That's what's going to blow it apart, because the borderline female with hypersexuality is not going to remain the same, because they aren't really, it's only part of the who you thought they were. Not that it's a grand deception, not that it's conscious manipulation, it's not outright seduction in a way that you could see it be with a narcissistic woman. So I'm going to do a couple videos on this too about how does this work with the narcissistic, hypersexual, super intense female. But right now, let me just get to the point. The very thing that leads them to idealize you and it all to be so wonderful in the beginning with the intensity and the hypersexuality and everything else is the very thing that will wear on the borderline, trigger her over and over again, one way or another. Her triggers, remember, not your fault, not your responsibility. It's a consensual sex space. And then what has happening to the borderline woman with all of her triggers as things go along, and she may not still consciously be aware or know at all why she's feeling what she's feeling, but this becomes the heart of the reason for the ghosting. So it can have many other aspects to it, many other different levels of inability to relate and emotional immaturity and lack of self, but the object of the relations of it all explains it all. So this very desirable, fantastic, gorgeous woman, usually, that men report meeting, that is so intense and hypersexual, and it's great. It's going to sort of be the undoing of all of that as she experiences triggers and as that hypersexuality wanes, because she's having difficulty and she doesn't understand it, and it's coming from her past, etc. And often, like I said, these women are usually childhood sexual abuse victims, and so they can't keep that at bay in its entirety. They may not have the conscious memory, they may have repressed memories, but it's in there, and it becomes the central straw that breaks the borderline woman's back, so to speak, and why they have to not only push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, but the ultimate push. The ultimate ghosting or discard happens because they can no longer maintain the hypersexuality due to the triggers that they're experiencing from what all that's about. That is, those are internal triggers. You, as the man with the woman, or with who's maybe your BPDX now, it's not your fault. It's not anything that you didn't do right or that you did wrong. And so this is the reality of the intense, untreated, borderline woman's hypersexuality and everything else that goes with it. That's just so amazing in the beginning, because the hypersexuality is as much only another part of the who you thought she was experience as all the other pieces and parts of that experience. Just sort of, I don't even know what adjective or what metaphor to use, but it's like loving this borderline woman, for men and for codependent men especially, and most men are codependent in these relationships to one degree or another. It's like trying to capture wind in a jar. And you can't. You think you found like the most amazing woman in your life, right? But then you start to see cracks in that, and you start to see there's problems, and you're walking on eggshells, and you're trying to make it work. And it's a trauma bond. But at the heart of that trauma bond, and especially for men, but I'll speak to the other side of the equation too, is this fantastic, great sex of the hypersexuality that can't last and can't stand over time, because they're going to be triggered and they're going to have all these problems, and it's going to lead to the ghosting, or it's going to lead to the relational rupture. Devastating stuff. Absolutely devastating and so painful, because along the way in the process, the other key aspect of this part of the trauma bond is that, and I'm not just saying it's just men that get addicted, lesbian women get addicted too in their relationships with the borderline hypersexual female. It creates such an addiction. And that is part of codependency, love addiction. But it is, I know I don't have to even try to describe it, because if you've been through it, you could describe it better than I could. But I'll just say briefly here in reference to myself, I experienced this with a quiet BPDX that I was with. And so to that degree I understand, but it's different for lesbian women than heterosexual men with the BPD woman with the hypersexuality. It really is only another part of the who you thought she was experience. And what brought the relationship together so well, which isn't all about the hypersexuality or intensity, but that's a big piece, is going to be the big and most predominant piece, along with other problems that people with BPD have untreated, that's going to be the reason for the relational rupture. You can't stand it anymore, and or they ghost you, and you end up with no choice in it, and there's no closure. And I just want to say, borderline personality disorder is a response to trauma. And many levels of trauma, not just sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is often the central, most traumatic aspect, but there's the abandonment trauma, there's attachment trauma, there's neglect, there's all kinds of other things. So to those out there who stress it must be called a mental illness, fine, call it whatever you want. But within that, this is more to the point what it is. And it's not like the borderline personality or the quote mental illness unquote is making them do this. It's their trauma. It's the relational impossibility of having a relationship with somebody with borderline personality untreated unless until significantly treated or absolutely healed and recovered. It simply is the impossibility. And this is what's at the core. And I just know that it's not talked about much out there, and so I'm going to be doing more at ajmahari.co as well. And I just thought it was really time to come forward with this because I've been working with men for 30 plus years now, and I've been hearing this for maybe not that whole time because in the beginning things are really different and BPD is changing. People's experience is changing. But I have heard this from so many men, and I understand it inside out now. And like I said, I had my own experience because maybe a lot of heterosexual men don't appreciate the reference to one commonality that isn't the same between yourselves and lesbian women. I happen to be a lesbian woman, so what I know about that is heterosexual men are attracted to women, and so are lesbian women. Now, that doesn't make our experiences exactly the same. It doesn't say anything about us having similarity, besides that. So, but from that vantage point also, I understand this in a way, but I'm not saying that that's what informs me most about it for men, because it's really been male clients of mine. And it continues to be the case for a lot of men that I work with, and likely will be into the future, because this love addiction of codependency and how that plays out for many men, and then on top of, I'm not trying to say you have a sexual addiction, like in a global sense, but this is part of a love sex addiction that takes place within the trauma bond to the untreated borderline woman. So again, I hope this is informative. I hope it's at least validating for some men. And I hope as men come along new to this, just figuring stuff out now, that it will be helpful in some way, shape, or form. I just know that it causes so much pain and so much trauma. And I have yet more to say on this coming. So if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please do. I'm going to do a live stream on this too. I want men to come to interact on that live stream, to share your experiences. And I'll have more coming on this too. So in the meantime, take care and just know that if you're struggling with this element of particularity, it's not only, but this can become a very central focus for men. The sex was great and I need that again. I want that again. It's not the only thing, but it can be a very big part for many men. And I say that with no judgment whatsoever. So I hope that that's helpful, like I said, but just know that you can heal and you can recover from this. But I'll have more to say in other videos coming about other offshoots of this. So how men have difficulty trying to adjust even through a healing process as I work with clients, to the idea that you could ever be attracted to a woman who isn't so intense and hypersexual. It becomes a really important part of the way that I work with men in helping them to heal and recover from codependency and these relationships, and then the trauma bond, breaking the trauma bond, and on top of that, the healing and recovering from what becomes, let me just say, a situationally limited sexual addiction, because it's not a globalized sexual addiction. I hope that makes sense. Take care.